Welcome to Civics in a Year, the podcast that makes civic literacy fast, accessible, and surprisingly engaging. In just 10 minutes an episode, we'll tackle one of 250 essential questions about American democracy, how it works, why it matters, and what it means for you. Whether you're a student, a teacher, or just someone who wants to better understand your country and your rights, you're in the right place. Civics in a Year is powered by the Civic Literacy Curriculum from the Center for American Civics and is produced in partnership with the School of Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership at Arizona State University. Welcome back to Civics in a Year. I'm really excited about this one because today we get to talk about Citizens United versus the FEC, the Federal Elections Commission. We have Dr. Beinberg with us today. Dr. Beinberg, when I hear Citizens United, all I can think about is corporations have free speech. Can you give us a little bit more on this case?
Yes, I would. And this is one of the cases that I laugh to my students. My goal is to make con law boring. And this is one of the ones where for folks like you and me, when this came down and shortly thereafterward, everybody was howling because they said Citizens United says X, and it actually doesn't say X. I'm going to make so you can see that it's boring and in some ways much narrower than its popular thing. To do that, I'm going to back up just a little bit to the last case called Buckley v. Valeo that it's a precedent of. Mm-hmm. Buckley v. Valeo was one of the early major federal election rules cases. And in that case, they effectively said that contributions by corporations, but the contributions could be limited to basically a political campaign. So if I'm running for office, you can only give me a certain amount of money because you want to avoid basically corruption concerns. So the Buckley v. Valeo case says independent expenditures of a group basically wanting to run an ad saying vote for or against Liz Evans, that's fine. But whether like how much money I, as Sean Beinberg, could give to Liz Evans, that can be restricted. And the court says, effectively, money is not directly speech. If you want to run an ad saying vote for Liz Evans, that's directly speech. But just me writing you a check doesn't count as speech. So that's the sort of the backstory case. And I say that because Citizens United, I think, effectively follows that framework. So the McCain Feingold campaign finance law that gets passed, interestingly, over a very odd signing statement by George W. Bush, where he says, I think this is probably unconstitutional, but it's above my pay grade. I'll let the Supreme Court fix it, which the president's no longer taking constitutionalism as sort of their obligation and punting it to the courts has been a problem that sort of evolved. And it's an easy case to pick on, but it's been a sort of evolving problem over the last however many decades. Okay. But the Supreme Court, so the McCain-Feingold Act, the relevant parts for our purposes is that it says non-media corporations that are engaging in political speech within, and there's a couple different day sort of frameworks, 60 days, 30 days, whatever, but within basically a fixed period of an election, have to do it through a political action committee, and it has to be organized in various ways. And so it effectively says non-media corporations, if they're running advertisements, if they're releasing material, it has to go through this really, really convoluted PAC system. Mm-hmm. And they also have to maintain disclosure laws. So like if that PAC is, who's giving the money or whatever. And the Supreme Court says, again, consistent with Buckley v. Valeo and over the protest of Clarence Thomas, who says disclosure requirements were effectively used to try to destroy the NAACP in the 1950s. So Thomas wants to say the disclosure requirements are unconstitutional. But consistent with that 70s case, the court says disclosure requirements are fine. But the main thing is that the court says independent expenditures are constitutionally protected speech. That if a group of people organized as a corporation want to run an ad saying Liz Evans is great, that they have a free speech right to do it, and it is at the core of the First Amendment, commenting directly on political issues and political speech. The dissent, Justice Stevens, wants to argue this is a time, manner, and place restriction, which is we've talked about before.
Mm-hmm.
We did the First Amendment stuff. That's fine as long as it's neutrally administered. So Stevens wants to say, look, these corporations can still run advertisement. You can still run the speech. You just have to organize it into a particular manner. Justice Kennedy, for the majority, rejects that position because he says it doesn't say nobody can run ads within 60 days or everybody can run. It doesn't, or all speakers or even all corporations, right? Because it has that media exemption in it. And so Kennedy argues that the McCain-Feingold rule says for a particular subset of speakers, we will impose additional burdens for them to, again, at their core, the Citizens United case is about a group that wants to release materials critical of Hillary Clinton before an election, right? Which I think everybody would agree that criticizing a presidential candidate for an election is core political speech. But the dissent wants to say the way this is drawn up is a time, manner, and place restriction. The majority wants to say no. Stopping a group of people from criticizing or praising a political candidate before an election is the absolute core of First Amendment political speech. So the Citizens United case, importantly, doesn't say that money is speech. It doesn't set a rule for a campaign contribution to either an individual or a PAC. It doesn't touch any of that. So it's much narrower than people said, oh, corporations are people and they can spend what, like that rule is a much older rule, but the corporations can do whatever they want with their money is not from the Citizens United case. It's much narrower. Can a group of people spend money on, again, it has to be them themselves. If they give money for Liz Evans to say how great Liz Evans is, again, Citizens United doesn't touch that. Buckley v. Valeo said that was fine. So Citizens United really is about a group of people organized as a corporation. And Citizens United is not Pfizer. It's not Walmart, right? People are organized as churches organize as corporations, right? All kinds of groups organize as corporations. So it sort of gets pitched as this means like Pfizer is going to suddenly, drop a bunch of money in Liz Evans's campaign. It doesn't say that at all. It says that groups of people can basically organize to criticize or praise. You're going to keep going with you as your future political persona, Liz, but they can criticize you. The interesting part and the thing that I think people get most upset about is not Citizens United, but it actually comes in a later case, which we can talk about in a second.
So what are the quick implications of the Citizens United decision on elections? Because, when we talked about this, when I taught AP Gov, we talked about the rise of super PACs, all of these different things. Did it fundamentally change how freedom of speech is protected through the election cycle? Or, you're talking about you want to make it boring. Was it really just corporations, which are made of people, have free speech?
Yeah, I think it's closer to that corporations, groups, or corporations have free speech to specifically, again, independently run advertisements pro or against Liz Evans. Because if, say, the Pfizer Corporation says, Liz, we really like you, and we want to run an ad on your behalf saying how wonderful you are. If they talk to you under federal election law, that is not an independent expenditure. That's a campaign contribution, right? If you say, I'm really hurting in Utah. It would be really great if you could run ads in Utah for me. And so then they run a bunch of ads, pay for a bunch of ads. Under federal election law, the FEC would treat that as a campaign contribution, which is restricted, and Citizens United doesn't touch that.
Okay.
So the implications of Citizens United itself are relatively limited, which is you can basically organize as a group of people and run ads praising or criticizing a candidate before an election. The controversial part, you alluded to the rise of super PACs, isn't Citizens United. It's a lower court case that comes down a few months later called Speech Now versus FEC, which has a really interesting alignment of judges on it. Both Merrick Garland and Brett Kavanaugh, for example, are on that opinion. And for I could rattle off other sort of interesting alignments. The Speech Now case says, and they heard oral arguments before Citizens United came down. So it's interesting that it gets decided very quickly as a sort of, and Citizens United says this. I'm actually not convinced that it does, because what Speech Now versus FEC says is contributions to an outside group, like a super PAC, those can't be restricted. That only contributions directly to Liz Evans can be restricted. But contributions to the Friends at ASU of Liz Evans PAC, that's unrestricted. And to my mind, it's not clear that that's even the most natural reading of Citizens United. The lower court thought it was. I don't think that's consistent with Buckley v. Valeo. Interestingly, when that case came from the circuit courts, Attorney General Eric Holder thought the case wasn't interesting and wasn't worth appealing to the Supreme Court to indeed get clarification. Does Citizens United require this or not? He thought that it would not matter. It turns out he was very mistaken on that, because that case then led to the massive increase of contributions to super PACs, which are effectively financially unlimited. There's been an effort actually in Maine in 2024, I think it was 24, it might have been 22. They passed a law which tries to restrict contributions to PACs in Maine in order to generate a test case to basically try to fix Eric Holder's thing where he's like, this isn't important. And so what I tell people is, you may have very good reason to be mad about the role of money in politics, but you should be mad at the Speech Now case. The Citizens United case is, in fact, much more technical and narrow than it is. So Speech Now is, again, for folks that are, maybe you think that it's totally fine to have that kind of a contribution, but Speech Now is what does it. Citizens United does not challenge the old framework that the amount of dollar contributions can be restricted. It just simply says, if you want to basically run an ad saying you like or dislike a candidate, you should be able to do that. Just because you're a corporation doesn't mean that you sort of lose that right.
Dr. Weinberg, thank you. I will let everybody know I have no intention on running for office. So anything said in here does not need to comply with the Federal Election Commission, because there is no election of Liz Evans. I'm very happy here at ASU. Thank you, Dr. Weinberg.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Civics in a Year. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with someone who cares about a constitutional republic as much as you do. For more episodes, resources, and updates, follow us on social media or visit us at civics.asu.edu. Make sure to check out the show notes for any relevant links. Special thanks to the United States Marine Band for their performance of the Stars and Stripes Forever. Let's keep building a stronger constitutional republic, one episode at a time.